You really expect me to believe that child is mine? That was the first thing he said to me. No greeting, no smile. Just that cold question thrown across his parents' kitchen table while the steam was still rising from the coffee his mother had poured. Before you start this story, take a breath. Because what happens to her could happen to any of us. Watch closely, every moment matters. I remember staring at him, not blinking because sometimes stillness is the only way to keep from collapsing. My hand tightened around the warm mug, anchoring me to the moment. I didn't lift it to drink. I just held it, letting the heat settle into my palms, giving myself a few precious seconds to stay calm. A younger version of me might have cried or argued. But not now. Not today. Today something in me was steady, too steady for a woman being accused like that. Because deep inside my purse, folded between coupons and a grocery receipt, was a truth he didn't know I already carried. The kitchen clock above the doorway clicked to 8:07 a.m., loud enough that I heard every tick between his words. The winter light through the window was a pale gray, soft but cold. His parents' house always smelled faintly of lemon polish and bacon grease, but that morning there was something sharper in the air. Something like metal or maybe tension or maybe the faint cologne that definitely wasn't my husband's. I noticed it the second I walked in, even before he opened his mouth. His mother stood by the stove, pretending to fuss with the eggs she'd already overcooked. She didn't look at me. Not even once. She only stirred that pan in slow circles like she was waiting for her cue in a play she didn't want to be in. His father, on the other hand, leaned in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room, arms crossed tight over his chest. He looked at me the way people look at strangers they're afraid might ask for money. Cold, guarded, already tired of the conversation. I didn't answer my husband's question right away. I simply placed the mug down carefully as if the slightest shake might break it. Then I asked, "Why would you say something like that?" My voice sounded too calm even to me. Calm in the way a person gets when the ground underneath them starts to crack and they know panicking won't stop the fall. He laughed under his breath. It wasn't a real laugh. More like an exhale filled with suspicion. "You know why," he said. "You've been spending a lot of time at work lately. Late nights. Early mornings. Private meetings with your boss. And suddenly you're pregnant? You think I'm stupid." His mother finally turned. "Maybe we should all take a moment," she said, but the words felt rehearsed like she'd practiced them in the mirror before I arrived. She still didn't look at me. That was my first real clue that this wasn't a sudden outburst. This was something they'd discussed. Decided even. I looked around the room slowly, letting it all sink in. The half-eaten biscuits on the counter. The folded newspaper with a crossword only half done. The quiet hum of the old refrigerator. All these ordinary things wrapped around something deeply wrong, like a normal picture with a stain spreading in the center. My husband shifted in his chair. "Just tell the truth," he said. "This is your chance." "My chance for what?" I asked. "To defend myself against something you've already decided to believe?" He didn't answer that. Instead he leaned back, rubbing his jaw as if he were the one under stress. The kitchen light caught the faint shadow under his eyes, the kind that comes not from worry but from lack of sleep. Sleepless nights usually mean guilt. Or planning. Or both. A quiet alarm bell rang in my mind. I noticed another strange detail. The trash can near the sink was half full of takeout containers. My mother-in-law never ordered takeout. She cooked every meal by hand even when we begged her not to fuss. Seeing those containers felt wildly out of place, the kind of thing you'd only notice if you were already watching everything closely. Something about them made me uneasy, though I couldn't yet place why. "I came here early," I said softly, "because I thought we were going to share good news. I thought this would be a happy moment." His father scoffed. "Not if the baby's not his." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they might be true, they weren't, but because they were spoken with such ease. As if they'd been rehearsed. As if this whole accusation had been prepared ahead of time. I folded my hands together to keep them from shaking. "Have you been talking about this behind my back?" My husband's eyes darted to his mother. And that was the moment, right there, I saw the lie. It wasn't in his words. It was in his silence. I leaned forward a little. "How long have you been planning to confront me like this?" His mother finally spoke directly to me. "We're just concerned, dear. These situations, they don't come out of nowhere." "Situations?" I repeated. "You mean my pregnancy?" Her eyes darted away. "We're trying to help you." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You're trying to corner me." The room seemed to thicken with tension. I heard the furnace kick on in the basement, a low rumble that made the floorboards tremble slightly under my feet. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street, but inside the kitchen, everything felt tight and trapped and weighted. Then another detail caught my attention. My husband's phone buzzed on the counter. Just once. A short vibration. He didn't reach for it. He didn't even glance at it. But both his parents did. Like they were waiting for it. I filed that away quietly. My heart thudded once hard. Not from fear. No. Something else. Something colder. Something sharper. A part of me that had been sleeping for too long woke up. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" I asked him again. He hesitated. That hesitation was everything. When a man is telling the truth, he doesn't pause. Not like that. Not with his eyes flicking to the side. Not with his throat tightening as he swallows. "You know what I'm accusing you of," he finally said. "Just admit it." "And if I don't?" I asked. His father answered instead. "Then the next steps are simple." Simple. That word stuck to me like a thorn. I took a slow breath. My hands were steady now. My heartbeat had settled. I felt strangely prepared. But I still wanted to test something. Just once. So I looked straight into my husband's eyes and said quietly but clearly, "Say it again." He blinked. "What?" "Say it again," I repeated. "Look at me and say it." He shifted in his seat. His fingers drummed on the table. He glanced at the doorway again, strangely as if expecting someone else to walk through it. Someone who might interrupt this moment. Someone who might have been part of whatever they'd been planning. His voice cracked just slightly when he finally spoke. "I don't believe the baby is mine." I didn't react. I didn't cry or scream or defend myself. I just watched him carefully, the way a person watches a puzzle piece slide into place. Because now I knew. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't even hurt. He was scared. And fear always tells the real story. I leaned back slowly, crossing my arms. "And what makes you think that?" He opened his mouth, but the answer didn't come. Not quickly. Not honestly. Not naturally. Instead, his mother rushed in again. "We just want what's best for everyone, dear." Oh, they didn't. They wanted control. They wanted a narrative. They wanted me to walk into the trap they'd been setting for who knows how long. I felt the secret inside my purse press lightly against my side. My hidden advantage. I didn't reveal it, not yet. This wasn't the moment. This wasn't the section of the story where truth came out. This was only the moment the cracks finally became visible. So instead, I placed both hands on the table, leaned forward, and said in a voice steady enough to silence the entire room. "Look at me, all of you. Because what I'm about to say, you're going to want to remember." And that is where the first confrontation truly began. Before a single truth had been revealed, before any evidence had surfaced, before the house of cards even realized it was trembling. This was the moment I saw fear in their eyes. And it was the moment they saw something new in mine. A woman who wasn't breaking. A woman who wasn't backing down. A woman who knew more than they thought. And I made sure they felt it before the coffee even cooled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I simply held their eyes the way I had promised I would. And after a few seconds of heavy silence, he was the one who broke. My husband pushed back his chair so suddenly that one of the legs scraped across the tile. The sound was sharp enough to make his mother flinch. He didn't say anything at first, he didn't even look at me. He just stood there breathing too fast, rubbing the back of his neck like a man cornered, not like a man searching for truth. Without a word, he stepped out of the kitchen and disappeared down the narrow hallway toward his old childhood bedroom. His parents didn't follow. They just watched him go with the sort of quiet panic people get when a plan starts falling apart too early. I could hear his footsteps pounding across the carpeted floor, then a drawer slamming open, then another. Something inside me tightened. A cold awareness. A recognition. Whatever he was looking for, it wasn't courage. It took everything in me not to reach into my purse right then. Not to pull out my secret. Not yet. Not in this heading. Instead, I kept my hands flat on the table, feeling the faint warmth still lingering beneath my palms, grounding myself as his mother pretended to clean an already spotless counter. When he finally returned, he wasn't empty-handed. He carried a thick manila envelope, The kind lawyers use for documents they don't want wrinkled. My stomach dropped, but my face didn't show it. I stayed still as he placed the envelope on the table with a dull, final thud. Not dramatic. Not graceful. Just final. His voice wavered only once. I think this is best. I didn't touch the envelope at first. I only stared at it, then at him, searching his face for some sign of doubt, some sign of hesitation, some sign of humanity. But all I saw was exhaustion and something like relief. The relief of a man who wanted to be done with the conversation before it had even properly begun. His father straightened his posture as if this moment needed a formal witness. His mother finally turned off the stove, her hand trembling just slightly before she placed the spatula down next to the pan. Breakfast was forgotten. Everything smelled like burnt eggs and cold distrust. I slid the envelope toward myself. Fully. Deliberately. Inside were exactly what I expected. Legal forms already signed on his side. He hadn't waited. He hadn't asked. He hadn't even tried to talk. He had prepared these before the coffee cooled. Before I even walked in the door. My throat tightened, but not with sadness, with a strange mixture of anger, clarity, and something like recognition. You did all this before talking to me? I asked quietly. He didn't meet my eyes. It was necessary. Necessary, I repeated, tasting the word the way one might taste something spoiled. Based on what? His father stepped in quickly. There's no reason to make this harder, dear. Harder. The word stung for reasons I couldn't immediately explain. I let the silence sit between us long enough for the furnace to kick in again. The air vent beneath the kitchen table sent a slow wave of warm air across my feet, but I felt colder than I had 10 minutes earlier. Colder because now the truth was taking shape. Not the big truth, not yet, but pieces of it. Threads. Shadows of intentions I had felt but not confirmed. I didn't even finish my coffee, I whispered. It slipped out before I could stop it. Such a simple sentence. But it carried everything. Disappointment, shock, exhaustion, and that quiet, mature fury only a woman who has lived long enough to recognize betrayal instantly can feel. His mother finally spoke directly to me, keeping her voice soft and measured. We think it's best to make a clean break. No accusations. No drama. Just a peaceful conclusion. Peaceful. It was almost funny. I slid the papers back into the envelope, tapping the edge lightly against the table. You're telling me you believe your son more than you believe me? She forced a tight smile. You know how men are. They sense things. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity had crossed a line into something I couldn't take seriously. They weren't even pretending to weigh both sides. They had already chosen. Already planned. Already acted. Which meant only one thing. This accusation wasn't a reaction. It was a cover. A cover for something they thought I didn't know. My hands felt strangely steady as I closed the envelope. The sunlight through the window had shifted slightly, catching on the edge of my wedding ring. I turned it once, slowly, noticing for the first time that the skin beneath it felt irritated. A small redness. Maybe from stress. Or maybe from months of wearing something that had stopped being a symbol of love long before this morning. He cleared his throat. I think it's better this way. For who? I asked. He didn't answer. His mother stepped closer, her voice low. Let's not drag this out. You can sign today and we can all move forward. Move forward. They said it as if we were discussing selling an old sofa, not dismantling a marriage. Then something unexpected happened. A small, subtle clue but powerful. On the refrigerator door hung a calendar, the kind with farm animals and inspirational quotes. A date 2 weeks earlier had a red circle drawn around it. No words. Just a circle. I hadn't seen it before. I wondered what had happened that day. Why it mattered. Why they wanted to remember it. Something told me it wasn't a holiday or a family dinner. Something told me that circle had everything to do with this morning. My husband shifted again, his hand brushing the countertop. When he did, I noticed something else. A faint mark on his wrist. A small scratch. Fresh. I wouldn't have thought anything of it if he hadn't yanked his sleeve down so fast the motion looked like a reflex. I logged it quietly in my mind. He sat back down, folding his hands together like a man bracing for impact. Let's keep this civil. I haven't said anything uncivil, I reminded him. You don't need to, his father replied. Your behavior speaks volumes. My behavior. I nearly asked what behavior they meant, but I already knew the game they were playing. Twist the narrative, weaken my footing, get me to defend myself so they could use my reaction later. But I wasn't playing that game. I took a slow breath. You made up your mind before you saw me. No, he said too quickly. Yes, I said softly. You prepared the papers before you asked a single question. He shook his head. That's not. Who told you to do it? I asked. Silence. A silence thick enough to feel. His eyes flicked toward his father, fast but unmistakable. There was the small answer to one of my earlier questions. His father cleared his throat. He's doing what's necessary for his future. His future. Not ours. Not the baby's. His. And what about my future? I asked. His mother softened her voice again, the way people do when they want you to swallow something bitter. You'll be fine, dear. You're strong. Independent. You've always managed. A compliment disguised as a dismissal. I pushed the envelope away from me again. I'm not signing anything today. My husband's jaw tightened. Why not? Because, I said, standing slowly, I haven't heard the real reason you're doing this. He looked at me with the expression of a man who had underestimated the woman in front of him. I told you the reason. No, I said. You told me a story. But stories have holes. And your story started cracking before the coffee cooled. His father took a step forward. Don't start making this difficult. But I wasn't making it difficult. I was finally making it real. I gathered my purse, slipped the envelope inside it and zipped it closed. I didn't look back as I walked toward the front door, because I didn't want them to see the tiny tremor in my lip or the slight sting behind my eyes. Not sadness. No. A grief, yes. A grief for the woman I had been before this morning. But also a quiet spark for the woman I was becoming. As I opened the door, cold morning air rushed in. Clean. Honest. I turned back just once, meeting my husband's eyes across the room. You think this is over, I said softly. But it's only beginning. And I'm not the one who should be scared. His face paled. His mother gasped softly. His father stiffened. Because they heard something in my voice they hadn't expected. Not anger. Not fear. Not confusion. Certainty. And certainty, especially from a woman they thought they could corner, is the one thing they weren't prepared for. I stepped outside. And the door closed behind me before breakfast was even over. 3 weeks. 3 quiet weeks. And they had no idea what kind of woman they had just created. I remember thinking that as I watched the highway lines blur beneath me mile after mile, steering my old sedan toward a place where I could breathe without feeling judged. I didn't say a word aloud, not even to myself. Silence clung to me like a second skin. But there was a strange comfort in that silence, a kind I hadn't felt in years. It was as though life had finally stopped demanding explanations from me. For the first time in a long time, no one was waiting for me to defend myself. The cabin wasn't mine. It belonged to a friend of my sister's who owed her a favor, and she agreed to let me stay as long as I needed. When I pulled up that first evening, the sky had already dipped into a soft purple, the kind that makes everything look gentler than it really is. The gravel crunched under my tires, and the sound startled a cluster of deer grazing by the tree line. I envied how fast they ran. I wished leaving a painful place were that instinctive for humans. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and dust. The wooden floors creaked under my weight, not in a complaining way but more like a quiet acknowledgement that someone new had entered. I placed my small overnight bag on the table and stood there for a while, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator and the wind brushing lightly against the windows. It was the first night in weeks I didn't feel like I had to hold my breath. I made tea, though I barely tasted it. My hands shook, not from fear but from the crash of everything I had been holding in. Betrayal, humiliation, the anger that simmered under my ribs. It all crowded my chest at once. I set the mug down before it could spill. I leaned on the counter with both hands, staring at the tiny black specks in the wood grain as if they held answers. But the truth was simple. I had been pushed into a corner. And I knew myself well enough to understand that a cornered woman learns to sharpen what she has left. The first morning I walked the property before breakfast. The frost on the grass sparkled under the early sunlight, and my breath puffed out in little clouds. My boots left soft impressions behind me. With each step my mind cleared just a little more. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was space. Space to think. Space to plan. Space to remind myself I wasn't the helpless woman they wanted me to be. I kept my phone turned off for 72 hours. I slid it into a drawer in the small bedroom and shut it away like it was a misbehaving child. No calls. No texts. No explanations. If they wanted to build stories about me, let them. Lies were the only language they spoke fluently anyway. By the fourth day, something inside me settled. Not forgiveness, I wasn't aiming for that. It was something steadier, something sharper. The realization that I didn't have to rush. The world was quiet. And that quiet belonged to me. I drove into the nearest small town for groceries. It was the kind of place where people still waved at strangers and held doors open a little longer than necessary. I kept my head down, but I felt their curious glances. A woman alone in her 60s, carrying 2 bags and walking with purpose. It probably looked like I had a story. And they'd be right. The cashier, a soft-spoken woman with warm eyes, commented on the blueberries in my basket. Said they were good for the heart. I smiled politely but didn't tell her mine had been split open like an old envelope left in the rain. Some truths are better folded and tucked away until you know what to do with them. Back at the cabin, the days slipped into a quiet rhythm. I cooked simple meals, read old mystery novels left behind by the owner, and walked the trails behind the property. But beneath every routine beat a steady pulse of calculation. I wasn't just healing, I was observing, remembering, noticing patterns in ways I hadn't before. When you strip away noise, the world has a strange way of revealing things you once overlooked. I replayed every conversation from the morning he accused me. Every glance shared between him and his mother. Every smirk from his father when I asked for a moment to speak. There had been details that didn't fit. Words said too quickly. Papers prepared too neatly. There was planning there, planning that didn't involve me. And that bothered me more than the betrayal itself. One evening I found myself sitting on the porch steps, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The sky was streaked with orange and deep red, like a slow-burning ember. I pulled my sweater tighter around me. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. A single idea began forming. Not fully, not clearly, but like a shadow taking shape. I didn't chase it. I let it come to me. Patience was becoming my quiet companion, teaching me that moves made slowly often cut the deepest. On the 6th day I opened the drawer and powered on my phone. It buzzed with messages, 37 of them, but I didn't read a single one. I deleted them all without blinking. If the truth mattered to any of them, they would have waited for it instead of attacking me before the coffee even cooled. I did, however, scroll through my photo gallery. There were images from the last year. Dinners, family gatherings, small moments captured out of habit. And in them I noticed things I hadn't before. His expression at a barbecue. His mother whispering into his ear at a birthday party. His father standing strangely tense behind us in a Christmas photo. The pieces were there. I just hadn't looked closely enough. That night a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Rain lashed against the roof, and the wind howled through the trees like something wounded. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the guttural rumble of thunder. And somewhere between the cracks of sound it struck me. They had been preparing to get rid of me long before that morning. The thought didn't frighten me. It clarified something. I sat up in bed, letting the idea settle fully. If they had spent months building a story about me, then they had grown comfortable. Careless. Confident that I was too naive, too soft, too trusting to notice. They didn't expect me to disappear into the quiet. They didn't expect me to think. They didn't expect me to sharpen. On the 10th day I drove into town again. This time I visited the local library. It was small, lined with older carpet and the faint smell of dust, but it had computers. I needed one to check a few public records and unfamiliar names that had floated through my memory during my walks. I wasn't searching for anything specific, just patterns, connections, threads I could pull without being noticed. What I found wasn't complete. Not even close. But there were hints. Enough to raise new questions and confirm old suspicions. By the 12th day I had a notebook full of observations, dates, odd comments, small inconsistencies in their stories. None of it was explosive on its own. But together, it looked like the skeleton of a plan someone had built behind my back. On the 15th day I took a long walk deep into the woods. The leaves crackled beneath my feet and the air tasted like cold metal. I found a fallen tree trunk and sat there for a long while, staring at the stillness around me. This place had held me, steadied me, taught me how to listen without reacting. Hunting, I realized, wasn't about aggression. It was about patience. About knowing when to move and when to wait. By the 19th day, my fear had burned away completely, leaving something colder. Something clearer. Determination. And on the 21st day, exactly 3 weeks from the morning they tried to break me, I stood in the doorway of the cabin with my packed bag, my shoulders squared, my pulse steady. I wasn't going home. I was going back. And I was going with purpose. That thought sat firm in my chest as I drove back toward the town I had left in pieces. The morning sun filtered through the windshield in thin, sharp lines, making the world look almost unfamiliar, like a place still waking up. My fingers gripped the steering wheel, steady but aware of the weight of what waited ahead. For 3 weeks, I had lived with nothing but my own silence. Now I was heading straight into theirs. The closer I got to the neighborhood, the tighter my breaths became, not out of fear but from the electric hum of anticipation. I had played every possible reaction in my mind. Shock, anger, forced politeness, maybe even a trembling attempt at guilt. None of it mattered. I wasn't returning to comfort them. I was returning to confront the truth in the only setting where their lies had flourished. Pulling onto their street felt surreal. The houses looked the same. Trim lawns, tidy porches, wind chimes swaying with a soft metallic whisper, but everything felt heavier. I parked a little ways down, not wanting them to hear the engine before I was ready. As I stepped out, the morning air hit my face with a cool sting. Grounded me. 3 weeks ago I walked away broken. Today every step I took toward their house felt deliberate, almost measured. Their porch still had the same uneven board on the second step. The same potted plant that had been dying since July now hung brown and brittle by the railing. The same welcome mat, though I'd never truly felt welcome there, rested crookedly by the door. I noticed everything in sharper focus. When pain quiets, clarity grows. I didn't knock immediately. I let myself stand there a moment, listening. The faint murmur of voices drifted through the door. His mother's tone, sharp, hurried, floated toward me first. His father's rougher voice echoed faintly behind hers. And then my husband's, low, irritated pacing. I recognized the rhythm instantly. He only paced like that when he felt exposed. Good, I thought. Let him feel it. I raised my hand and knocked. Firm, steady, controlled. The voices inside cut off so abruptly that the silence seemed to swallow the air between us. I heard quick footsteps, the whisper of fabric, the shuffle of hesitation. Then a pause. When the door finally creaked open, it wasn't my husband standing there. It was his mother. Her face drained of color the instant her eyes met mine, as if she had seen a ghost she wasn't sure she had the right to be afraid of. Her lips parted slightly but no sound came out. I stepped inside without waiting for permission. Her hands twitched at her sides, unsure whether to stop me or let me pass. I didn't look at her again. I walked straight into the living room. My husband stood by the window, arms crossed. His father hovered near the dining table, posture stiff. Both men stared at me like they were trying to determine whether I was real or a consequence of their guilt. The house smelled the same, brewed coffee, old carpet, a hint of lemon cleaner, but something else lingered underneath. A nervous smell. The stale scent of people caught too far into their own lies. So, I said, placing my bag softly onto a chair, which one of you wants to start? My voice surprised even me. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It carried none of the shakiness I had expected. It held something calmer, something they couldn't quite read, and that unsettled them far more than anger would have. His father cleared his throat first. We didn't expect you back this soon. I met his gaze. You didn't expect me back at all. He flinched, barely but enough. My husband finally spoke. We don't owe you an audience. Oh, but you do, I said gently. After everything you threw at me before breakfast, the least you owe me is the truth. His mother finally found her voice. We only acted on what we were told. Told by whom? That question hung in the air. Heavy, direct, dangerous. I watched each of their eyes shift slightly, avoiding mine for a second too long. My husband's jaw tightened. We had reasons. Then explain them, I said. I'm here. I'm calm. I'm listening. The tension thickened. My heartbeat stayed steady but theirs didn't. I could see it in the way his father wrung his hands, The way his mother's breath hitched every time she glanced at me. The way my husband tapped his thumb against his elbow like he was counting seconds until he regained control. I let the silence stretch. Silence is powerful when you know how to wield it. Finally, his mother broke. You disappeared. You didn't answer calls. You mean the calls you made after throwing divorce papers at me? She swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Another thread. Another slip. 3 weeks of quiet had sharpened my ear for cracks in stories. I moved to the armchair nearest the fireplace and sat. I crossed my legs and rested my hands calmly on my knee. They hated that posture. My composed, collected posture. It left them without a target. I didn't come here to argue, I said, my voice steady. I came to hear the truth from your own mouths before I decided what to do next. My husband narrowed his eyes. What do you mean, decide? You'll find out soon enough, I replied. But not from me asking the wrong questions. I want to ask the right ones. He shifted uncomfortably. Good. Let him wonder. The first correct question came to me naturally. When did you start preparing the divorce papers? His mother opened her mouth, but his father cut her off. A few days before. That's interesting, I said softly. Because your lawyer dated them a full week before that morning. My husband's eyes flickered, a quick flash of panic. But there was. I leaned forward. So tell me, why were divorce papers being prepared behind my back before you ever accused me of anything? His father stiffened. His mother looked down. My husband blinked slowly, calculating answers that wouldn't expose what they had hidden. Before any of them could speak, footsteps creaked behind me. I turned slightly. Their neighbor, Mrs. Hall, whom I hadn't noticed earlier, stood in the hallway holding a casserole dish. She must have been dropping something off or overheard through the open door. Oh, she said, startled. I didn't realize we had company. Her arrival shifted the air in the room. Not dramatically, but enough. She looked between us with that gentle, too curious gaze older neighbors specialize in, the kind that picks up on tension better than anyone else. His mother rushed toward her. It's not a good time. Mrs. Hall tilted her head thoughtfully. Seems like it's exactly the time. I watched her carefully. Something in her expression told me she knew more than she let on. And I filed that away. Every piece mattered. As she backed out the door, her eyes met mine briefly. A soft look, a subtle nod. It wasn't sympathy. It was recognition. The second she left, I turned back to them. Let's try again. Why were those papers prepared early? My husband broke first. Someone told us things. Things we believed. Who? He hesitated. Then quietly, a friend. A friend who knew enough about our marriage to encourage you to leave me before sunrise? His mother's eyes darted away again. His father cleared his throat. My husband clenched his jaw. He kept my voice steady. Give me a name. He shook his head. I'm not doing this. Then I will, I said, standing slowly. Because the truth is sitting right here in this house, and every second you avoid it tells me I'm getting closer. I walked toward the hallway, letting instinct guide me. I knew this house. I knew its secrets. Secrets whispered behind closed doors when they thought I wasn't listening. I stopped outside the guest room door. And there, on the edge of the carpet, was a single envelope. Unmarked. Tucked just far enough under the door to go unnoticed by someone who wasn't paying attention. But I paid attention now. I bent and picked it up. Behind me, I heard all three of them inhale sharply at once. I turned the envelope over slowly, feeling the thick paper between my fingers. It wasn't sealed. It wasn't folded properly. Someone had shoved it there in a hurry. I slid one finger under the flap. My husband stepped forward. Don't. I looked up at him. And smiled. Not kindly. Not softly. But with a quiet knowing that reached all the way to my bones. You hid enough from me already, I said. Let's see what you tried hiding from each other. The room fell so silent I could hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen. I opened the envelope. And whatever they expected me to find, whatever truth they dreaded, I hadn't revealed it yet. Not to them. Not to myself. Not until the next moment arrived. I held the papers inside unread. Then I lifted my eyes. And their entire house seemed to stop breathing. I felt the tension tighten around me like the walls themselves were bracing for what I would pull from that envelope. My fingers held the papers lightly, almost delicately, though my pulse steadied with a kind of certainty I hadn't felt in years. 3 weeks of silence had taught me something powerful. The truth doesn't need to shout, it only needs to be revealed. I lowered my gaze and finally looked at what I had been holding. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't divorce paperwork. It wasn't signed statements or accusations against me. It was a single page. And across the top, in confident handwriting I recognized too well, was a name, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. Her name. The woman he'd sworn he had no contact with. The woman he told me was someone from the past, unimportant, barely a memory. But the letter told a different story. My husband's voice broke the silence first, thin and trembling. It's not what you think. I held up a hand. Save your breath. He froze, his mouth still parted, the rest of the sentence dying in his throat. His parents stood like statues behind him, both gripping the air as if I were holding something far more dangerous than paper. I read the letter silently, slowly. The words carved themselves into me with each line. She's asking you to take responsibility. You promised we'd settle this quietly. Your family doesn't need to know. The child deserves more than secrecy. That last line. It hit me in a place I hadn't touched since I left the cabin. My breath left me in one steady exhale. I looked up. My husband couldn't meet my eyes now. His mother was shaking her head, whispering, "No, no," as if denial could rewrite what I had just read. His father's jaw tensed and a dark flush crept up his neck. I folded the paper once, carefully, deliberately, as if I were sealing away the last fragile belief I'd ever held about this man. "You had a child with someone else," I said, not loudly, not angrily, just truthfully. His mother let out a strangled sound. His father closed his eyes. My husband took one step forward but stopped when I lifted my chin. I didn't have to say anything. The gesture alone was enough to keep him back. For the first time since I walked into their home, no one tried to speak over me. No one accused me. No one pointed a finger. Because the truth had finally chosen a side. My side. "How long?" I asked. He swallowed. "Before I married you." I nodded once. "And after?" His silence answered for him. I let the next question sit on my tongue for a moment, not to hurt but to confirm. "Is this why you were so ready to throw me out? Because you needed space, for them?" His mother gasped. "She's manipulating this." I cut her off with a calmness that startled even me. "I'm not manipulating anything. Your son already did that job." His father tried to steady his voice. "We thought you had someone else. We were told." "By whom?" I asked. "By him? Or by her?" That question landed with the force of something heavy, something undeniable. My husband dropped his gaze. And in that tiny gesture, those few seconds of looking anywhere but at me, I understood everything. He hadn't been driven by anger. He had been driven by fear. Fear that his affair, his child, his secrets would come out. Fear that the life he had built on careful lies would unravel. Fear that I, of all people, would be the one to expose him. But he didn't know me. Not really. He never understood that quiet women aren't weak, just observant. I folded the paper again and slipped it into my bag. Then I spoke the words that had been forming since the cabin, since the moment I realized I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted clarity. I wanted closure. I wanted to walk away knowing they would sit with the truth long after I left. "I'm pregnant," I said plainly. The reaction was immediate. His father stepped back as if he'd been shoved. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. My husband straightened suddenly, breath stalling in his throat. "You what?" he whispered. I nodded slowly. "With your child." Silence rippled across the room. Not a stunned silence, an unraveling one. A silence where every lie they'd built collapsed inward. His mother reached toward me, the beginnings of an apology trembling on her lips. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I met her gaze without blinking. "Because I wanted to see who you all were before you knew." Her hand dropped. My husband stepped toward me again. We can fix this. We can talk. We can." "No," I said softly, and the word held the weight of 3 quiet weeks. I picked up my bag, slinging it over my shoulder, the envelope tucked safely inside. I walked toward the door, passing each of them one by one. None moved to stop me. None dared touch me. Not anymore. When I reached the doorway, I paused and looked back. Not with affection, not with longing, but with a kind of clear, cold understanding. You accused me because you needed an excuse to hide your own guilt, I said. You tried to silence me because you feared the truth. But I learned something while I was gone. My husband swallowed. What? That silence isn't weakness, I said. It's preparation. I opened the door, letting the cool air wash over me. And I prepared well. His mother took a trembling step forward. Where are you going? I turned fully, resting my hand on the doorknob. I'm leaving with my child, I said. And I'm leaving you with the truth you've all been running from. I stepped outside, hearing the doorframe creak softly as I pulled it open wider. My husband tried one desperate plea. You can't just walk away. I met his eyes for the last time. I already did, I whispered. Then I walked down their porch steps with a steadiness that felt like freedom. The sun hit my face, warm and honest. My footsteps felt lighter. My chest, clear. Behind me, their house remained frozen, silent, shaken. Inside, 3 people stood confronting the truth they had tried to bury. A truth with consequences far sharper than any accusation they had thrown at me. I reached my car and opened the door. Before getting in, I looked back once, not out of regret but closure. I hope you take responsibility, I called out. For all your children. The words struck them harder than any anger ever could. I got in, closed the door gently, started the engine. Not once did I look at the house again. As I drove away, the weight I'd carried for so long slipped off me like an old coat. The road ahead stretched clean and open. My child and I would build a life without their shadows. Their guilt would stay behind, alive, breathing, unavoidable. And they would never outrun it. Because I left them with the one thing they feared most. If this story hit your heart the way it hit mine, subscribe for more powerful, emotional revenge stories. You're not alone, and every week I'll give you another story that reminds you of your strength.